Securing the Realm, Purview, MCP, and Agentic communication.
Hello, so welcome to our next session of Secure the Realm. I'm Josh McDonald.
Hi, and I'm Chris Lloyd-Jones. And today we're going to be talking around Securing the Realm, focusing on Agentic AI, communication, and securing that communication. So, Josh, why do we care about securing the communication between agents?
So, there's a lot of reasons to care about securing communications. One is you probably don't want people other than the person you're sending it to be able to read it. Usually, anyway, unless there's a very good reason to do so. Other times you want to kind of just ensure that compliance requirements have been met in different countries across the world, but also you want to be able to essentially verify that the person you're speaking to is the person they say they're going to be as well. There's a lot of different reasons why securing communications, especially if we go back to the CIA triangle of security, so integrity, availability, and wow, I've forgotten the C off the hoof. Well, we'll come back to that.
And now up the clip, we'll cut it out. CIA, sorry, well, integrity, confidentiality, integrity, confidentiality, availability. Right, I'm going to hit mark and then just repeat it. Go.
Of course. So as well, we need to kind of go back to the CIA triangle of security. So, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, making sure that only we are getting the message to the people who are meant to read it and be able to consume it. Integrity, that message is received correctly as it was meant to be. It's not been modified or, erroneously damaged, corrupted some way. And availability, we want to make sure the service is actually running. That message is actually being received at all, in fact.
That was particularly a lot of power cuts here recently, so very important.
Well, yes, and in the world of service outages and all sorts, it just becomes increasingly important. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons for why we'd do that, and as part of that, we've been looking at Microsoft Purview. So yeah, we'll deep dive a bit more into what Purview is all about in a bit, but ultimately, it's a data security solution.
Like, we're talking about agentic communication, and that seems to become a need right now, because when you and I were first building applications, it was, we wrote a prompt, we wrote instructions, we sent it to a model, probably ChatGPT, and we got a response back. There were no real agents there. There was just call and response, call and response. And now we're trying to get to agents that can work with one another. So rather than securing the message between me on my computer and the server remotely, we need to also secure information between agents, treating them really like how we might permission a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not some kind of philosophical debate over is an agent a human. We're not at that point, at least for the foreseeable future. But like you said, it's about making sure all those communication channels, us communicating to an agent, agent to agent, that end-to-end chain of instruction and response is secured as you'd expect it to be, like if you were interacting with ChatGPT and you gave it a prompt and got a completion back. Same principle, you just have to extend that chain out a little bit further.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting article actually from the MIT Technology Review saying that we need to start thinking of AI as normal, that rather than it being utopian or dystopian, that everyone is really panicking and that we should be just considering it yet another technology that's been rolling out. And they were looking at a survey an essay from Princeton, a 40-page plea for everyone just to calm down and think of AI as just a normal technology, which I kind of like. My skepticism of some of this.
Yeah, of course. It is an interesting one. You've heard me talk about this before, but when I was starting out with generative AI 4 years ago now, and using some of the early APIs, I, in an interview, asked a technology CEO what they thought of AI and is it the future? Is it going to kind of enter the workplace with us? And I was told, no, it's just another form of automation. I mean, I think I'd still disagree with that as I did back then. But there is that sense of wisdom to the principle that what we're doing with it is often automation or some kind of data retrieval, data generation, and stuff like that. So we should be treating it as something relatively normal, even if it is currently being revolutionary.
I know which CEO that is, but I won't prod it.
Yeah, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and all that.
Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of agentic communication and to help set the scene for Purview. So there's many frameworks and tools out there for making agents speak to one another. I use speaking kind of figurative sense. Semantic kernel obviously is one of the ones I use day to day. And over the last 4 or 5 months, there's been a lot of buzz around MCP, and then over the last month or so, there's been the announcement of A2A, agent-to-agent protocol, with MCP developed by Agentic, standing for the Model Context Protocol. So MCP was designed, if you think about Claude and a desktop app, to try and connect AI applications to external tools and data sources, exposing tools that can do things and resources that act as data sources, as well as a set of pre-built prompts to help make things go a little bit easier. And then for our talk at the end, we've also built an MCP server for Purview. So MCP came first, and there's ways to secure it. You can use an API gateway, you can add authentication, but it isn't naturally there beyond the transport. Then A2A, the agent-to-agent protocol, which you can see as complementary, or you can see it as like VHS and Betamax, developed by Google, was more around enterprise communication between agents, agent discovery, and interaction protocols. Honestly, I think MCP was going to get there anyway, and I would have rather people were playing nice, but that's just like my personal view. So MCP, connect to external resources, A2A, collaboration. Where's the security? Where does Purview come in?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it did have to laugh a bit there about the whole idea of everyone playing nice, because, when it comes to open source, that's really what it's meant to be about. And for most people, it is about that. So it does amuse me with that. But, where does security come into it? When we're looking at generative AI applications, either securing them or using them to essentially act or support or act as, in some cases, the defender in a security context, Microsoft Purview is a data security, data compliance, and data governance tool. It brings all three of these together. Now, as part of that, it has a pretty comprehensive set of solutions. We could be here all night talking about all these different ones. And, when we're talking about model context protocols, it's actually a great place to start, because there's a lot of different data moving around a lot of different sources. Purview is that center point for a lot of these communication and collaboration sources, including things like Microsoft 365 Copilot, including ChatGPT, both enterprise and consumer, including third-party data sources, including the original data sources that AI are even based in. So your Databricks, your Spark, Snowflake, AWS, if that's really your poison. It all has Purview as a center point if used correctly. And so it's a great starting point for MCP. A lot of people have focused around what can be done for M365 Copilot specifically and M365. But if you dial it back a bit, zoom out, as it were, there's a lot more that could be done with data and data security, capitalizing on it, Purview. So just to kind of pick one or two of these out. So information protection is probably the most fundamental one that a lot of people would have heard of, whether it's used on M365 or Copilot or another data source. It's about being able to classify data. So applying some sort of label to it. You can make up whatever that label is. It can be a not for Copilot. It could be a highly restricted. It could be confidential. It could be public. And then use the other parts of Purview, such as data loss prevention, to apply logic to those labels. So the label is really you going around and classifying data, either manually or automatically, and then using the rest of the tooling to put logic around that, to block its transmission through data sources, such as email to external parties, is the classic example, or even just cataloging.
I like the data classification. My question for you is, where does this come in for Agentic AI? How does Purview cross over? Where does agentic communication come in? Because this seems like a really comprehensive suite. What's the tie between the two?
So for agentic communication, generative AI applications can fall into the purview of Purview, the remit of Purview, maybe we'll say, themselves, so that we can understand the prompts, the completions of those prompts, data sources that it kind of got shared with it or shared back as part of it. But not only that, but there's an increasing influx of generative AI tooling around the security Copilot side of things that makes heavy use of data governed in Microsoft Purview to essentially give defenders the edge and the advantage to get data in front of SOC teams faster, to be preparing investigators with e-discovery case files and helping them understand what's going on with that. So really the overlap is being able to get that data to security teams where it needs to be, and also tracking that agent flow itself. So it's at least twofold, I'd say.
Okay, so I like the breadcrumb there around how do we get this information to teams and how to track the agent flow. I think that might be a nice segue to showing MCP in action and getting data from Purview. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let's get cracking.
Okay. You need to stop sharing. Right. Can you mark the clip you're end? I can.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I've been marking it just so I know which bits to cut.
Yeah.
Okay, so in here's one I made earlier, and we might upload the outtakes, we might not. Josh and I last week created an MCP server for Purview. Here we are. So you should now be seeing Visual Studio on my machine, Visual Studio Code to be precise. To open up the command palette, and in the latest version of VS Code and with GitHub Copilot, I've got the ability to install and set up MCP servers. So I noted before that MCP servers were originally designed just to expose resources, and they were not really focused on the enterprise. And that means that servers can be defined either as input and outputs on the command line, or they can be defined as endpoints which are exposed as actual APIs, like web servers. This is what we worked on. So I'm going to open up that palette again, list servers, and you can see that I've got the Purview server. I'm going to start that server, which means I should see it running. I should see the server setting up. They are waiting for server to respond to initialization request, building it, etc. Great. And then I can see all the various different parts of the context that I can add. And you can see in my list of tools now, I've got get audit logs, get data lineage, the data catalog summary. I can also tweak the tools that are available to the chat. So you're reading between the lines, VS Code and GitHub Copilot have native integration with MCP servers, the same as Claude. Which one do you want to get started with? Which one should we try out?
I think we should have a look at some of the information protection, the labeling, perhaps. as kind of a good starting point.
The label changes.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to go for it.
A nice little tip here. You can see it in the chat. I often ignore this little bit of VS Code when it's got little bits on the right. I gloss over it. But you can add context by clicking on the Add Context button. But if you're using it by typing and you want to make sure a tool was used, I could say, I type in the chat, look for data lineage changes. Or I can force it to use the tool by typing in the hash, and I can say, get data lineage, forces the agent to use the tool, pushing enter on my keyboard. Didn't send, don't know why. Great, that's a bug. Let me send that again. And typical my VS Code is frozen. Let me restart. Going so
That's
well.
interesting.
Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start the servers again. Get sensitivity label changes. So waiting for the server to respond to initialization request. Discovered 5 tools. I would hope it means it's running now. There we are. Send. So GitHub Copilot's like, should I run this tool? Okay, it's from the Purview. It's got built-in start time and end time because I haven't given it the specific start time and end time. Note that MCP servers can attempt to use code maliciously. Click run. There we are. Let me analyze the information. It's like ChatGPT. GitHub Copilot's able to get the data. It can see the changes. It gets back some JSON, and GitHub is processing it going. There is one change, date and time, where the sensitivity label is modified from general to confidential. And it also knows that this is consistent with best practices for personally identifiable information because a personal email address is included.
Mm-hmm.
What else should we try?
Wow. Let's have a look at data lineage as well. That's often a question around governance and where data has actually been, especially when you talk about agents as well, that flow of the data. Important.
If I typed in the hash to force it to use that tool, it used the tool, it ran and requested information from the entities and tables we have set up. It gets the data back, and we can see here is the entity ID, here is the lineage between the source, the process, the target, and it's used downstream in the Power BI. This would help us to meet things like GDPR and data flow designs, for example. We can see the relationships and how data is transformed, and GitHub Copilot is able to explain it.
Yeah. So really what's happening is the MCP is able to kind of reach out through the SDK that's available for Microsoft Purview and retrieve this data from some sort of environment, and then the generative AI is again doing what it does best of kind of like processing that data for a user and doing something with it. So it's kind of got the functions, the calls to get the data, but then also the AI type thinking that you're kind of used to as well.
Yeah. So I think that's where we wanted to wrap up. We wanted to talk about what Purview was, what MCP was, what A2A is, the fact that these tools are very rapidly being adopted into the systems we use, like GitHub Copilot, into Claude. It's meant to be on the ChatGPT roadmap as well. They're rapidly being adopted as protocols. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, well, I'm quite pleased that we've managed to get so far with it in a relatively tight time frame, actually. I think the proliferation of MCPs is actually broadly quite a good thing. You're seeing a lot more of them, and so I think it's quite a good thing to have ones to latch on to all your different tools, and also be kind of enriched with the contexts you're looking to use those tools for. So there's still more to do, to be honest, because the Microsoft graph is nothing if not pretty deep. So there's even more to look at in the future, and sky's the limit really with MCPs.
Yeah, and in keeping with our securing the realm theme, there is an optional D&D flavor, so you can have the Purview data processed usefully, or you can have fantasy style, should you like. We had to chuck it in there. I hope you found this useful. Write any comments, let us know what you want, and yeah, speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.